Ever feel like, the American dream, it's like this puzzle, but like half the pieces are missing? Well, today we're going to try to find those missing pieces.
Oh, yeah.
We are. In a book called 99% Perspiration.
Right.
It's by Adam Chandler.
Hmm.
Have you heard of this one?
I have. It's a really fascinating look at how, like, the stories we tell ourselves about, like working hard and being successful in America
Yeah.
don't always match up with, like, what actually happens.
Exactly. Chandler, he calls it the American abracadabra, this idea that anyone can achieve anything if they just work hard enough.
Right, right.
But he makes a really compelling argument that it's not that simple.
He uses this really great anecdote
Oh, yeah?
about the comedian Louis Black.
Okay.
And he sees these two Starbucks
right
across the street from each other in Houston.
What?
Yeah, and Black, he jokes that it's like a sign of the apocalypse.
Oh, my God.
But it also, like, makes you think about how this, like, relentless pursuit of success, even when it seems kind of absurd, it's kind of, like, baked into how Americans think.
Yeah, it's so true. And Chandler takes us all the way back to Christopher Columbus.
Wow.
To show how this idea of the self-made man has been shaping our thinking for centuries.
Yeah.
But what's really eye-opening is how he connects Columbus's own story to this myth.
Yeah. Because even Columbus, like the supposed ultimate explorer and discoverer was actually super reliant on like royal patronage and those like existing trade networks.
Interesting.
It challenges this whole image of him as like this lone individual who pulled himself up by his bootstraps.
Totally. It's like Chandler saying, hold on a sec, let's look at the whole picture here.
Right.
And speaking of a fuller picture, he doesn't shy away from the darker sides of American history. He digs into the Columbian Exchange and how it wasn't just about introducing new foods to the world.
Yeah. It also led to the transatlantic slave trade.
Right.
And the exploitation of indigenous people. It forces you to ask, how can we like reconcile those realities? Yeah.
With this whole like work hard and you'll succeed narrative.
Exactly. And that's where it gets even more interesting because he dives into the American Revolution.
Okay.
But not in the way that you learn about it in school.
I see.
He goes beyond the simple like good guys versus bad guys story.
Right.
And highlights figures like Harry Washington.
Okay.
Now, Harry Washington was a man enslaved by George Washington.
He was.
He was.
Wow.
George Washington owned a slave named Harry Washington.
That's wild.
I know, right? And Harry Washington chose to fight for the British.
What?
In order to gain his freedom.
Wow.
It's a really powerful reminder that the fight for freedom wasn't so black and white.
Right.
And that a lot of people were excluded from the very ideals that the revolution was supposedly built upon.
Yeah.
It makes you realize that this whole American abracadabra thing isn't just like a feel-good story. It's actually shaped by some pretty complex and at times uncomfortable historical realities.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so he doesn't stop there either. No.
He even brings up the recent debates about divisive concepts bills.
Right.
Which would try to like restrict what can be taught in schools about race and history.
Interesting. So is he saying that by trying to like control the narrative of the past, we're actually stopping ourselves from like really understanding the present?
That's exactly the connection he makes.
Wow.
He argues that a safe version of history, or like a simplified version, can actually prevent us from grappling with the really complex issues that we face today.
It's like trying to build a house on like a foundation with cracks in it, right?
Yeah, exactly. You're making me want to pick up this book.
You should.
He also talks about Madam C.J. Walker, right?
He does.
The first female self-made millionaire.
Yeah, but he goes beyond just like the typical like rags to riches story.
So he's not just celebrating her success,
right,
but also acknowledging the systemic barriers that she had to overcome.
Exactly. He puts her achievements in the context of like when she lived and highlights how like resilient and innovative she had to be as a Black woman to achieve that level of success when she was up against so much.
Yeah, it's like he's adding these layers to the stories we thought we knew and revealing these hidden complexities that are often left out.
It's so true.
I'm also curious about this idea of the American frontier that he talks about.
Yeah.
Because it's not just about westward expansion.
No, it's about like symbolic frontiers.
Okay.
Like these spaces of innovation and entrepreneurship that keep shaping the American dream.
Can you give me an example?
Yeah, so he uses the Chicago World's Fair in 1893 as like this really important moment. So on one hand, you have Frederick Jackson Turner presenting his famous frontier thesis. And it argued that, like, the American spirit is, like, defined by this constant push westward.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
But then, at that same fair, you have the debut of the kinetoscope.
Oh, wow.
Which was Thomas Edison's early motion picture viewer.
So the birth of cinema is happening at the same time as this, like, defining theory.
Exactly.
About the American frontier.
Uh-huh.
That's so interesting.
And think about how film then went on to shape how we understand the West, you know? Like,
yeah.
The cowboy, the outlaw, all these, like, iconic images.
Right.
It shows how, like, technology and storytelling play this huge role in how we think about, like, working and being successful.
It's fascinating how he weaves together all these different threads, you know?
Yeah.
Like history and technology and popular culture to tell this bigger story about the American work ethic.
It's really cool.
But he also argues that even frontiers can be, like, fleeting, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
He uses Route 66 as an example.
He does, yeah. Route 66, it was like this huge symbol of freedom and adventure.
Right.
But ultimately it declined when the interstate highway system came around.
Yeah.
It reminds us that what we think of as the frontier is, like, always changing. And what we think is permanent can, like, disappear really quickly.
That's so true.
Yeah.
So if, like, frontiers are always changing, what does that mean for, like, the people trying to figure them out?
That's a good question.
Does Chandler give any examples of people, like, adapting to these new frontiers?
He does. He talks about the Laces family.
Okay.
And they're Indian-American immigrants. And they find, like, unexpected success in the cannabis industry.
Oh, wow. In the cannabis industry.
Yeah, in Oklahoma.
That's definitely not your typical American dream story.
I know, right?
Wow.
It shows how the frontier isn't just about, like, physical places or, like, traditional industries anymore. It's about finding opportunities in these new markets.
Yeah.
And being willing to take risks.
But he doesn't, like, sugarcoat things.
No, he doesn't.
He also talks about the Tulsa Race Massacre.
He does.
And, like, the destruction of Black Wall Street.
Yeah, the story of Greenwood, Oklahoma is, like, a really powerful counterpoint to that.
Yeah.
You know, here's this thriving Black community that was just tragically destroyed by racial violence back in 1921.
That's awful.
It's a heartbreaking reminder that, like, working hard and building community aren't always enough.
Right.
To overcome these, like, deeply ingrained systemic barriers.
It makes you question this whole, like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps mentality.
You
know?
Totally.
Like, what happens when the system itself is rigged against you?
Exactly. And that's the point that Chandler's making.
Yeah.
He argues that we need to go beyond just these, like, individual success stories.
Okay.
And recognize how important community is. Social safety nets, you know?
Yeah.
And giving credit to others for their contribution.
It's easy to get caught up in those, like, rags to riches narrative.
For sure.
But he's pushing us to look at the bigger picture.
Yeah, absolutely.
He brings this perspective to, like, modern work culture as well.
He does.
He talks about this pressure to, like, find meaning in our jobs. And, like, the lines between our personal and professional lives are blurred.
Yeah.
And he uses this term, the time tax that we all pay.
Right.
Just to, like, navigate the system.
The time tax. What's that?
It's like all the time that we spend on things like filling out paperwork.
Okay.
Or dealing with bureaucracy. Or just navigating these, like, complicated systems.
Right.
Especially when it comes to things like public assistance.
Yeah, it's like time that could be spent working or being with family.
Exactly.
Or, like, pursuing personal interests.
Yeah.
But instead it gets eaten up by these, like, unnecessary hurdles.
I think a lot of people can relate to that, you know?
Yeah.
Like, we're constantly jumping through hoops.
Cool.
Just to get by.
Yeah. He even goes into the debate around universal basic income
or
UBI
okay.
as a potential solution to all of this.
Now, that's a topic that always gets people talking.
Right.
So I'm curious to hear how he frames it.
Yeah.
Is he, like, arguing for UBI?
Well, he presents it as a way to, like, provide a safety net for people who are struggling to make ends meet. Especially as, like, automation and the gig economy keep, like, disrupting how we think about work. It's about making sure everyone has some level of economic security, no matter, like, their work situation.
It sounds like he's making us really rethink our ideas about work and success.
Definitely.
Does he offer any, like, alternative models for how we could approach work?
He contrasts American work culture with, like, what they do in France.
Okay.
Where they have this thing called a right to disconnect.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that.
You have.
Yeah, it means you don't have to answer work emails or calls after hours.
Exactly. Right? It's a legal right in France.
Wow.
And it shows how important it is to set boundaries between work and life.
It's such a different way of thinking than like the always-on culture we have in America.
It really is. And Chandler explores like what's bad about that always-on mentality.
Yeah.
He talks about how it affects our health, our relationships, our communities. It's like we're so focused on work that we forget how to actually live.
So is he like advocating for a more balanced approach?
Yeah, he argues that we need to step back and look at how we relate to work.
Okay.
And find a balance that lets us thrive.
Yeah.
Both at work and in our personal lives. It's about realizing that work is just one part of a good life.
Right.
Not the whole thing.
It sounds like he's tapping into something that a lot of people are feeling right now. For sure. Like this sense of burnout, this feeling of being overwhelmed by the demands of modern life.
Totally. And he connects this to like how different generations feel about work too.
Oh, yeah. He talks about that whole okay boomer thing, right?
He does.
Like younger generations are kind of pushing back against this idea that you have to hustle all the time.
Exactly. He points out that younger generations are dealing with a different economic reality.
Right.
You know, they're graduating with tons of debt, going into a job market that's like constantly changing. They're not just looking for a paycheck.
Right.
They want something more.
Yeah.
They want purpose and flexibility, work that matches their values.
It's interesting how he ties this back to the American dream.
It is.
Like, what does the American dream even mean anymore?
Right.
With everything changing so fast.
Yeah, and he talks about the political polarization, too.
Okay.
He says it's partly because we're all sorting ourselves geographically and ideologically.
Interesting.
Like, people are living in these echo chambers surrounded by people who agree with them.
Yeah.
And it makes it harder to understand people who are different.
It's like we've lost that sense of shared purpose.
Yeah.
You know, that idea that we're all in this together.
Right.
Which is kind of ironic because the American Abracadabra is all about this shared belief in upward mobility.
Exactly. And Chandler says that this lack of connection, this inability to bridge those divides, is making it harder to deal with all these complex issues that we're facing as a society.
So it's not just about succeeding on your own.
No.
It's about working together to create a better future for everyone.
Yeah.
So is there any hope? Or is it just all bad news? It's not all doom and gloom, is it? Like, is there any hope?
No. He doesn't end on like a super negative note. He actually like offers this hopeful vision for the future.
Okay.
But it means like we got to do some serious thinking.
Okay.
And be willing to like challenge how things are.
Okay. Listening. Tell me more.
So he talks about like this new American story, you know.
Okay.
One that moves past this myth of like everyone's got to succeed on their own and embraces a more, you know, like complicated understanding of work.
Okay.
And how it fits into our lives.
So it's not about like getting rid of the American dream completely. It's more like updating it.
Yeah, exactly. Like realizing that the old way of doing things isn't working for everybody.
Right.
And that we got to make a system that's more fair and sustainable.
Does he give any like real world examples?
He does. He talks about things like green jobs programs that give people jobs and help the environment at the same time.
That makes a lot of sense.
Right. It's about creating jobs that benefit everyone.
So instead of just trying to be successful ourselves, we need to think about how our work helps everyone.
Yeah. He's saying we need to like look at the big picture when it comes to work.
Okay.
And recognize that, you know, community matters.
Yeah.
Safety nets are important and everyone should have a fair shot.
It sounds like he's really asking us to change how we think about work and success.
He is.
Like, it's not just about climbing the ladder or getting rich.
Right.
It's about finding work that's meaningful.
Yeah.
Something that lasts and helps make the world a better place.
Exactly. And I think that's a message that like really speaks to people.
Especially now. Yeah.
Yeah.
This has been such an interesting look at this book.
It has.
I think 99% Perspiration is something everyone should check out.
Definitely.
Especially if you've ever felt that pressure to hustle. Or if you've wondered, like, is this really what the American dream is all about?
Right. Or if you think there's got to be a better way to work and live.
Totally.
Yeah. It's for you.
It's a book that makes you think.
It really does. Chandler's a great writer, too.
Oh, yeah.
He brings together history and economics, personal stories, pop culture stuff.
Wow.
Even like complicated topics are easy to understand.
And he makes you think.
And he makes you think, for sure.
Yeah, I think that's what's so powerful about books like this.
Totally.
They don't give you all the answers.
Right.
But they make you ask better questions.
Yeah.
They make you think about work and how it fits into your life in a new way.
Yeah, it reminds us that, like, the American story is still being written. And it's up to all of us to decide what kind of story it's going to be.
That's a great point to end on.
Yeah.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
Of course it was fun.
And for our listeners, if you want to learn more about this, check out 99% Perspiration by Adam Chandler.
Yeah.
You won't regret it.
Until next time.
See ya.